Howdy, howdy, y'all. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Some Antics. Today, I am joined by the one and only Adrianne Mallett. Adrianne, welcome back to the stream.
Howdy, Finn. Howdy, Some Antics viewers. It is
It's
awesome to be back.
it's awesome to have you back. So you've been on actually a couple times, a few times as guest host actually. But this connects to your very first appearance on Some Antics. You want to kind of talk about that?
Um, I would love to. So my name is Adrianne Mallett, and I'm a front end engineer. For pronouns, I like she, her, hers. And the first time I was on Semantics, we talked about test driven development. I do have a passion for software testing. I believe that it's powerful and useful and helps us make beautiful, scalable code. And a really popular technique for software testing is test driven development. So that's what our first episode was on. We wrote our tests first. We focused on TDD. And a question that came up in that stream was, if we're using TDD and if we have really high code coverage, are we bulletproof? And the answer is no. And we unpacked that a little bit, and we teased that there was something out there called mutation testing. And I actually was manifesting even in that episode that I could come back one day and that could be our topic. So it's really cool to be here.
Absolutely. Also, I want to call out everyone who's in the chat, and also Jason Langsdorff for rating with a party of 144 viewers. Jason, you've brought a gross viewership. No, I love all of y'all, but 12 squared is a gross. So, howdy, howdy, Boot Crew. It's great to have y'all. Yeah, so I'm super, super excited to be chatting with Adrian. And we had kind of talked about this notion of like, well, is 100% code coverage like a bulletproof defense for our code? And you teased that no, it wasn't. So let's get into today's topic, which is mutation testing. What is mutation testing and what is it trying to solve?
So mutation testing is a way to assess the quality of your existing software tests. So if you have tests, this is a way to test your tests. So more specifically, it will evaluate your unit tests, and it'll tell you if you have any unit tests that are missing or that have bad logic. These tests are awesome. Conceptually, these tools like do all work the same way. It's like it seeds faults throughout your code. So those are created by something that is called operators or mutators. And those are a little bit different depending on which tool you're using. But what is awesome is these are things that you're not having to remember or simulate or check in your unit tests. These are able to run a bunch of tests very quickly within minutes, and it will show you where your gaps are.
Okay. So why would I want to test my tests though? Like, I wrote the tests. Why do I need to test my tests? Do I need to test the testing of the tests? Like where does it stop and why
Yeah.
do we care?
So the reason that we care is that it is very easy, way too easy to accidentally write a garbage test. You can write a test that will always be true if your logic boils down to true equals true. That's an example of a test that like would always pass. And there's other examples. But the thing is that might not get caught during code review with human
Mhm.
eyes on it. Um, and so you might have beautiful green 100% code coverage. You might have very seemingly solid test suites, and it can give you a false confidence because you may have abstracted the logic wrong in some of your tests, or you may have forgotten to account for like very specific like edge cases and rare cases. So this will help you catch that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think about this in terms of like, one initiative I've seen on teams I've been on is this notion of like code coverage, right? Like broadly speaking, every bit of logic in your code should have a test for it is the general idea of code coverage, right? But code coverage itself isn't good enough because there's still possibly you might not have written yeah, you could have written very weak tests for that and still technically have
Mhm.
gotten the coverage that 100%, but your test isn't meaningful, I guess.
Mhm. Exactly. And so that's part of my like introduction to this tool. I mentioned in that TDD episode that I was on a team that had the passion for software testing. We felt super confident. We were pair programming all the time, and we had a 100% threshold for our unit tests. Well, when we found out about the mutation testing tool, we thought, let's run it. Like, I'm sure we'll have a really high score. It was not terrible, but it wasn't 100. And it was a good ego check. We realized that there was some logic that we had not accounted for in our unit
Hmm.
tests. And a really big misconception is that mutation testing is like a new programming language or a new like type of test that you have to learn how to write. And that's not true. If you have gaps in your tests or missing tests, you're just writing additional tests or fixing your existing tests in whatever unit test, like test framework and test runner you're already using. Um, and so, because of that, and because the reports that these tools generate are so granular and specific, we were able to raise our mutation testing score pretty quickly. Um,
Okay,
and then, yeah, then we really had like true confidence that our tests were testing what we thought they were.
gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. All right. So then, if I wanted to start diving into this world, like, what are like, I don't even know how to begin. Like, what is it I should be doing, or where do you wanna take this from here?
So the first thing that you should do is kind of like ask yourself what your testing goals are. If you're working on a very small personal site, you might not even have unit tests. So it wouldn't be high value to add this tool unless you have the plan to go in and add unit tests. And that would be an example of something where maybe you're just practicing the skill. Maybe that's the point of those tests. You might have a totally different user case, though. You might be working at a large enterprise or like a large open source project where there's many hands in the code base. These are really good use cases to use a tool like this because, like I said, it checks the quality of your incoming unit tests. It's a way to check your own work before you open a merge request. But it's also wonderful when you're reviewing code and deciding to accept it or not. This checks your teammates' work.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, so to figure understanding your use case, that's the first thing. The next thing is you're going to want to make a tooling selection. So whatever programming language you're in, you can do a web search for that. You could do like Java, space mutation testing, and you will quickly see what some of the leading tools are. Um, but you'll want to use a tool that plays well with your language. Yeah. So today we're going to be using Stryker. We're going to be using Stryker JS, but you should know that Stryker also has support for TypeScript and C Sharp and Scala.
Deal. I'm just pulling up the Stryker homepage right now. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, is it? Oh, it's not mutation, is it? It's mutator. I
Mutator,
thought I could just
yeah.
wing it. I thought I could just
Mhm.
freestyle it. But this is the tool we're using today, and it's got
Yes.
ports for a bunch of different languages. So,
Mhm.
um,
So I first ran into Stryker like 2019. The docs are really well written and the support is strong. The developers are responsive like on Twitter or if you use Gitter. And they're also very transparent about their roadmap. I've seen several versions like be released over the last few years. This is a tool that's very actively maintained. So if you're trying to choose a JavaScript mutation testing tool, this may be the one that's right for you. Yeah.
okay, makes sense.
I think, yeah, on this page, if you scroll down a little bit, so I mentioned some of the languages it supports right here. These are some good features as well. They have great documentation on their actual mutators, which we'll get into today. And you can see it's test runner agnostic, so it probably plays well with what you're already using. And yeah, this landing page of the Stryker Mutator IO, this has some more like selling points for the tool. So definitely worth checking out.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely worth checking through these docs. But today, you are my documentation.
Okay.
All right. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you also sent me ahead of time some links for the chat. Yeah, like a poster view and an article view. You'll remind me which of
Yeah.
these links you want me to pull up?
Let's look at the poster view together. Okay.
Okay.
So I gave a tech talk last year on mutation testing, and it was language agnostic. So I mentioned some of the leading tools for popular languages. Um, but this is like a great introduction to the concepts of what's going on. It talks about a little bit more about the history of the tool and some challenges that you might run into. So I see the posters loading, but it has a section about the developer experience that you can expect if you and your team pursue mutation testing. It's got tips for like if your runtime is slow, how can you speed that up? And I think that this is a good link if you're trying to explain this to someone else. Like you could send this to your tech lead, right? Or your friend that you're building like some game with or whatever. Um, so yeah, this is a resource that I wrote. I think that it will help you, especially if you're a beginner to this type of testing.
All right. Excellent. Okay, so man, where to go from this? Do you want to are there things you want to caveat about mutation testing before we get into this, or do you want to start like getting into some code? What do you think would be best to do
Yeah,
from here?
I think we're in a good point to let's do a demo with the Stryker tool, and then we'll have a lot of time at the end for questions.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
ahead of time, I've been having some lag issues. So ahead of time, we did clone a repo and install our dependencies, but I wanted to share the link with our friends in the chat real quick. There's a repo that the Stryker team provides that we'll be working with today, and so we have that.
Yeah. So the name of this Stryker example is they have a fairly simple front end project. It's called RoboBar, and the idea is like it's a fictitious bar where robots are serving you things to drink, and it is a great thing to run mutation testing over. Fun fact: they weren't even trying to write bad unit tests or tests with gaps. They actually earnestly were trying to be thorough and have their test suites like be complete. It's just so easy and natural as humans to be really biased when we're testing code that we wrote ourselves and to forget about edge cases and things like that. So anyway, when you hit this example, there is a TLDR at the top, a too long didn't read. If you don't want to pull down the code base and run it along, it has hyperlinks for you, 3 key things. The first one is the UI to the RoboBar page, because I think it helps you understand what the project is testing and some of the pieces of it. The second thing is the coverage report. If you'd like to, you can open the coverage report in a new tab. It's that second red link. Yeah. So this example is using like Jasmine for unit testing with Karma as a test runner. And on the screen, we've got a unit test coverage report.
Mhm.
And the main thing to take away here is that it's beautiful. It is 100%
Yeah,
all across. Yeah.
yeah. Like, there's nothing
It,
more for me to do here, Adrian. Like, we could go ahead and sign off for the day.
yeah, and it's so tempting to draw that conclusion. Your tech lead would be happy if you have a product owner. You would have confidence if you were releasing to like production. Um, but that is the value of running this tool over your code base to check your work. So if you flip back to the example page, that third link is a hyperlink to the mutation testing coverage report, and it's not going to look like this one.
Oh no. Oh no. I'm worried. All right. Okay, so all files, mutation score. Okay, so all of these seem to have been ranked. You were talking earlier like a score of 100, and it literally is that. So it looks like routes.js. I how that's where I want to start because the fact that this is empty is concerning to me. Does that mean there are no tests?
That can be what that means. If it is empty, yeah, that probably, and so that's an important thing to call out. If you have things that you're choosing intentionally to not test, you're able to tell it to ignore those and not include it when it's calculating the mutation score.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And there could be a strategy there. Like it could be something you have an external dependency on or something you don't own. There could be a reason that you or your team don't want to test something. Hmm.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it looks like,
Uh,
our app.module.js, like this is great, very thoroughly tested, right? Everything else is weak, right? Not well tested
right.
at all, it seems.
Well, it's subjective. So, like, let's
Oh,
give them credit. It's not zero,
that's fair.
right? Like, an attempt was made, some tests exist.
So, okay,
And
so actually this is a
yeah,
great question then. Like on a subjective mindset, like most teams that I've spoken to don't seem to know that mutation testing's a thing, right? And I can
okay.
imagine if you pulled up a dashboard that said, "Hey, your tests like have a score of like 25%, like your tests are a quarter good," right? That can be really daunting. Do you have kind of recommended thresholds? Or how are you going to
Oh,
tackle
yes.
this?
Okay. So that's the thing is I don't want you or your team to feel demoralized if you use this tool and the coverage is really low. This example is 59% about, but it could be much lower. The reason that you're not going to be demoralized is because this is just your starting place. This can be your baseline. So you can configure whatever that is. So in this example, it'd be like 59%. That could be your threshold that you make the standard so that all incoming code, you don't let the score fall below that. And then what you can do, um, if you're like on an agile team, you can write stories in your backlog. But if you're just working alone, this is a form of tech debt. You could actually plan to take chunks of your project and you can raise the coverage a few files or a few folders at a time. And yeah, so that's a great call out. Like it's not an all or nothing thing. Another thing to call out is it just depends on your use case. Your team may not need 100% coverage. Your team may be happy with that 59% because this is like the bird's eye view. But when we start clicking around and we open these files and we see what mutations
Mhm.
it was doing, um, software testing is an art. There is some subjectiveness to it, and your team or you can decide, okay, these are mutators we care about and which ones are negligible. If it's
Yeah.
testing things that don't matter for a business logic, then you can ignore it. You can say that's fine, but you're still getting feedback on your code base. It's finding it, so you have the choice to ignore it instead of it not being found where you would never know about it. So you wouldn't even be able to choose to ignore.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, so then the next question I have is going to be around like all of these like number killed, survived, timeout, stuff like that. This mutation score.
Mhm.
Maybe while we're here, let's just talk about like what is a mutation? What's
Okay.
actually happening? Like how is the score being generated?
Mhm. So you take an existing code base that has some existing unit tests. Okay. And for each file of your source code, Stryker is running through with a set of rules. Those are your mutators or your operators. Okay. And so if your team is very advanced, you can write your own, but most commonly, you want to use what you get for free with that tool. So I think the Stryker mutator, I've got a link to it. Okay. So, but then what it does is like line by line, if a condition is met, it will modify your code. So like a,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Okay.
So, and that has the effect of just like basically introducing bugs, right? More or less.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
Bugs or faults, or those are mutants. Okay.
gotcha.
So one example could be like an arithmetic operator where you have some arithmetic signs,
Okay.
things like equals and plus lines and things like that. And what it does is it literally replaces those symbols in your code with the other available symbols. And what it's looking for is it's created a mutant. Is the mutant killed or does the mutant survive? And so what we mean by this language if your code has been mutated, you want a unit test to catch that. So if it catches it, they consider the mutant killed. But if the mutant survives, that means that your unit test didn't fail when you modified the code.
Gotcha.
And
So in the
that's a
example,
bad outcome.
in
Yeah.
the example of like, arithmetic, right? Like I can imagine you've got a UI that like totals up some sum, right? And
Mhm.
you know, presumably you would have a test that says, hey, given value A and value B, I expect that the total should be A plus B. And
Mhm.
so if Stryker goes in and changes the UI logic to actually be A minus B, a test should fail, right? Because you should have written a
Right.
test around that logic. And if your test didn't fail, it's perhaps not testing
Mhm.
something critical there,
Yeah.
right? And so it's going,
Um.
hey, your tests aren't failing in response to this. And so therefore you
Yeah.
probably need to add some tests around this logic.
Exactly. So on your screen, this is the report that Stryker generates for you, and you can see a version of the report in your terminal. But this is the really pleasant like UI version where you open
Mhm.
it in a browser. Okay. And so, do you see the second file called review order component.js?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that blue name of the file is hyperlinks. You can new tab or just click on it. The reason I chose this file is because this contains a really good example of a piece of business logic where you would care. So remember, this example is robots are serving drinks, and some of the drinks are alcoholic. We care about compliance, right? We care about the age of our user. So if your code base is checking for age, that's an example of something that you really, really don't want to get wrong.
Sure.
So it has an arithmetic operator in here. I think it's like
This
it
one,
might be
line 9?
line. I think so. So do you see at the end of the line there's a red dot? When
Yeah.
we click on this, we get it should open something at the bottom. Okay. Do you see that down there? So
Yeah.
that one is an arrow function survived. I think if you go up a line on line 8, there's two.
Okay.
It made two mutants on that line. Okay. So one is arrow function.
Here's arithmetic.
Okay, so yeah. Yep. Okay. So this is an example of like a place where you would really care.
Sure.
um yeah, and so when you're running this tool in your code base and you have these reports, like this is very specific. You know exactly what line the mutant was created, and the documentation tells you what is going on. So now as a developer, you are being coached on what unit tests to either go back and write or to like append or modify.
Makes
Does
sense.
that make
Okay.
sense? Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Wow. I had no idea it was gonna give this level of detail. Um. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow.
And in your terminal, like it's not this level of detail, but it still tells you the file and the line. So
Mhm.
you can just use your IDE to navigate to the specific mutant. And there's that popular expression, eat the elephant one bite at a time. So with Stryker or with any mutation testing tool, kill your mutants one at a time. Start at the beginning and go one by one, and you'll get through it. And you will learn a lot more about your code base, what it's doing, but also you'll be stronger at testing. Um, so it's an amazing tool, not just for code quality, but it will upskill you as a developer.
Makes sense. Also, I love my onk in the chat. Mutant elephants. Right. So okay. So yeah, you've generated a report like this, right? And you're gonna start tackling this one at a time. So maybe we even just kind of go in and write some tests to like fix this, kind of show off that workflow. What do you think?
I think we should.
Okay.
So yep, the name of this file was review order component, and I mentioned that this example is using like Jasmine as a testing tool. So we want to find the matching test file
Okay.
for this. Yeah.
That'll be in here. Test unit review order component spec.js. And yeah, we're gonna look for the one that matches up. I guess there wouldn't necessarily be one that matches up, right? It's saying that like the test survived, so
Yes.
we would need to add a test for this arithmetic, right?
Yeah. Often you're missing a unit test completely, but always take a moment to check if you partially tested it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Um. Oh, and we've actually got a comment from American 2050 who says line 30 is the code itself for the test. It should be 18 or greater, right? Not just greater than. Um. Yeah, that is a comment about down here. Right. So probably if I had to guess, oh yeah, see that's what it's done right here, right? Is like um what the mutant did was check like, hey, what if I did greater than or equal to? Um and yet our tests did not catch that change. And here actually probably like this mutation is actually the right thing to do, right? Like um knowing what I know about legal drinking age laws, right? This should be greater than or equal to. Yeah.
hmm And that's another thing to call out. Sometimes your unit tests are good, and the problem is actually in your source code itself. So like I keep mentioning, this is auditing the logic of your code. So
Mm.
sometimes the change is needed just on the test side, sometimes just the source side, and sometimes it's needed on both. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So, okay, here we go. So I saw there was somewhere, here we go. Should allow if the user is 24. Should not allow if the user is 12, but what it's not checking is if the user is 18. So,
Mhm.
um,
So yeah, if you want to, we can duplicate this test. We can rename it and give it a good title for the logic we're about to check. And then we'll change the setup of the test where we exercise it in our actual assertion. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we're gonna say from here on out, if you're 18, yes, you can get alcohol because that's how it works. At least uh, in my corner of the globe. And then here we're gonna find the line of code that was being complained about. We're just gonna fix that. So in this case, it caught an actual issue with our business logic that, um, you know, presumably our team reviewer, my developer teammate, did not catch when they committed this code. You know. All right. Cool. What other? So how would you go about fixing then some of these up here? What would you do for these?
Well, so we have options as a developer. We can try to fix multiple of them and then check our work, or we could keep a shorter feedback loop, and we could because we just added one test, we could run it now actually and
Okay.
see if we moved the needle. Do you want to do that just to get confidence
Yes.
that yeah.
So we did test that the script would work ahead of time.
Mhm.
So kind of peeling back the curtain a bit. But in the package JSON, this project had a Stryker script that we can run. So that's what we're gonna go ahead and do.
Mhm.
npm run Stryker, and this is gonna take a minute. It
Okay.
it does, as we found out ahead of time, take some time because it's gonna be running a lot of tests, right? And it's gonna be running a lot of different
Mhm.
mutants, a lot of mutations. So yeah,
Yeah, so this is cool because this is a teachable moment and we can use this time. Um and I actually see a question in the chat from Building Bedrock Layout about VI test. Just checking. You don't mean PI test, you mean VI test, correct?
this is a test runner called vtest, which is
Okay.
meant to be plugged into the Vite build tool.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm dropping in the chat is the roadmap for Stryker. I didn't see VI tests on there, but yeah, that's where you can check. And if it's something that there's a demand for, they definitely prioritize based on what the community wants most. Okay, so even now, like this is an example. Okay, so um, I have a lot to say about what's happening right now with like it being a little bit slow. we're actually so privileged and lucky to be in the great year that we are now, because mutation testing has been around a very long time, since like the 1970s, and it was very unpopular because it was so computationally expensive. And as our technology has like caught up, it has become more realistic to use this more widely. Okay.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's still slow, and that's there's many factors that go into it. It can be the size of your code base. It can be specific to your machine or workstation, um, and there can be optimizations going on with the tool itself. Okay. Um, so in 2019, my team was running into a CI/CD problem where Stryker was really slow in our pipeline. Um, so that's continuous integration, continuous delivery. And at the time, Stryker didn't solve this for us. So we had like a workaround. We actually wrote like a little bash script that we put in our YAML, like for our CI/CD pipeline, that said, pay attention to what files are being modified and just run Stryker on the changed files. And that saved us a lot of time, and that was what we used for a long time. But I'm excited to tell y'all, like, our stream, Stryker just came out with version 6.2.0, which has an amazing feature that solves that for us. It speeds it up. It's actually called iteration, or sorry, incremental mode. And that, fun fact, was the most upvoted issue that Stryker ever had. So I'm dropping I'm dropping the link. Yeah. And we don't have that turned on because our demo is doing like 5 point something something. We're not on the latest available version. But this is one huge way that you can speed up the runtime for a mutation testing tool. Okay.
Now,
There's
that's
a few.
probably going to be, from what I know of like other tools that have their own incremental build stuff, like that's for like local running, right? Like as you're like running your
Mhm.
project and making changes real time, like it'll rerun the tests. I don't think, based on what I
It
know of
can
like
be
CI/CD, I think it probably would need a like cold start from the beginning, right?
Um, so it can be for both. It can be
Okay.
for local and for CI. And so the thing that I linked on Stryker's blog, this does handle it in the CI case. So that's
Okay.
like a huge victory for all Stryker users. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
And good timing. So let's see if we can find our uh issue here. So we need and we won't, right? Like cuz we just fixed this. Okay, so this looks like we're, oh no, that's success component. Um I really hope it has like off the window. That would be, where where are we looking? We're looking for this. Should be up. Oh, review order
So
component. Okay.
yeah.
And here we go. So the issue we knew was on line 30, but here, line 26 had an issue, line 37 had an issue. Nothing comes up for line 30. So we have fixed that one specific issue that Stryker flagged for us.
And I think that we did. Another way to check it is keeping track of what the overall number was. So do
Okay.
you actually remember how many we had that survived on the file originally?
It looked like 9 survived on the file originally based on this
Yeah.
HTML report. So then if I go
Okay. And
down to
our
the bottom here,
we are hoping to see 8. So we want to see if we get 8.
okay, and we're looking, does 9 survived?
Okay. So then I don't think our work is done yet. So did we so now we debug it.
Yeah,
So we expected to see one mutant killed because we added a test, but we still have 9. Is that Oh, okay, so you kind of moved your cursor. Did we see something about line 30?
I didn't think
Um
so. Here we go. Oh! Oh, it says, hang on, it says 16, and then here are tests that ran, and we did have should allow if user is 18. Wonder if the, okay. Oh, okay. I see. So the method we changed was being called elsewhere in the file. And so I think we killed one mutant, but it introduced a new mutant elsewhere where it's like, hey, this logic isn't necessarily tested.
Mm.
Interesting.
Um, well, thank you, Stryker, keeping us honest. And that happens all the time in development. Like you find something and you solve it and you feel really confident. But it's nice to have this guardrail. Because honestly, Ben, if we weren't using this tool right now, I don't think I would have got that. I think I would have just been like, oh yeah, we handled it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, brutal.
So yeah, so now that that mutant is surviving, let's try to target that specific one. Yeah.
Okay. Oh God, the my editor is suddenly not happy with me. Okay. So the issue now was with this line 16. So if not this age check, or if this is allowed to buy alcohol with this age. So I want to see kind of what test we've already got there. But this is testing the submit method. Okay. Um, which here we go. Okay. Oh, wait a second. This was in the submit method. We never. Interesting. We that's where we added our test. Interesting.
Well, so let's think aloud. So at this time, did we make any change to the source code, or did we have we just changed our test so far?
We did change the source code. Yeah,
Okay.
because I set this to be greater than or equal to.
Okay. And when we do that, and maybe we do this in a second, you want to make sure that your unit tests are still passing, as well as like
Yeah.
your mutation. Yeah,
Okay, so let's try that. I forgot to check the package JSON, but it's gonna be npm run test, right?
it is. Yes.
Cool. You. Um. There we go. Yes. Let's see if we broke a test. Also, I want to shout out some more people who are in the chat right now. Nicola, hello, welcome back. Anthony's here as well. Welcome back to the stream. Um, yeah, I find this incredibly interesting. Like, just I so my journey learning like kind of test driven development and that kind of stuff was, when I
Mhm.
was starting out, I heard that like unit testing was important, and stuff like that. But I learned React by way of a video course. And that video course technically had a segment about unit testing, but the unit test did not usually get very much did not get further than expect component to exist. Um and so it wasn't a like particularly quality test. And so I was never quite sure, like I never felt like I'd built a rigorous process around generating unit tests. And this actually feels like, it gives you that feedback, that cycle there. Um
Mhm.
okay, so our test did pass, but like it gives you like a methodical approach to figure out where your tests need to go.
Definitely. This will guide you if you're working alone as a developer. Like it audits your logic and it guards you from getting the wrong abstraction, and it gives you a very clear idea of like what to tackle next.
Mhm.
So that's beautiful if you're developing alone. It's also beautiful if you're trying to work with anybody else, whether it's just one more teammate or a whole team. Um, it's very useful during like now, like we're pair programming. Um, this helps us look at this in the same direction.
Absolutely. Um yeah, okay. I still don't know though why this would fail then. Why
So
Oh,
when oh good.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say, we had 9 mutants and we changed our tests and we thought that we'd have 8, but we still had 9. Did we check not just what line it's happening on, but what operator it is? Because
Oh,
it might not be an arithmetic operator anymore.
okay, yeah, let's check it. So we know it should be somewhere up here. I'm increasingly worried that we're gonna have our history fall off of the buffer, but okay. So all right, survived Boolean literal. Oh. Oh, so
Oh,
it's not checking the age at this point. It's checking oh, okay. Got it. There's an exclamation
yeah.
mark. Oh wow. Got it. So it removed our little exclamation mark not check. Oh, that's brutal. That is
Mhm.
brutal. Okay.
And yeah, so a Boolean literal in Stryker means that if something is making an assertion about something will happen when something is true, then the mutant it creates is what happens if it's false, or the other way around.
Okay.
So dropping the docs for that in the chat. Okay.
Gotcha. Test ran. Place order component submit allow if age check is disabled. Like we had a test for this. So is that test bad? Is it just not a okay? Let's see. Age check is false. Oh, it's not.
So
Wait.
so I think that what it's doing is it's checking if the age check is true. And oh, did you just change that?
No.
Oh no, you scrolled up. You scrolled up. Okay, you're on
Yeah.
line 44.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but it looks like we have that case handled on line 50.
Yeah. So if it's supposed to check for the age,
Mhm.
then it has all of our checks for like, if you're of legal drinking age, if you're above legal drinking age, or if you're under legal drinking age. And each of these it has the age check. Um, wait. Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Oh, but it is just checking that a path has been called. What is the location path? What is that? That is
That is a good question to ask. So I'm not sure what that is in this file. So we should hunt that down.
okay. I'm not
And
terribly
maybe,
familiar with like Jasmine and Karma, so this is not like this kind of thing is not a
yeah,
kind of test I've seen.
I think that is very valid. Um, I'm almost wondering if if we need to add like an additional assertion. Um,
Okay.
because like look, so if we compare these two tests, um,
Yeah, I gotcha. Go back to those tests. Okay.
okay. So it looks like one is like the age check if it's true, one is the age check if it is true, and they have different ages, and what they're both asserting is just that that thing is called. Um and
Yeah.
when we say that out loud, is that actually what we expect to happen?
Yeah, no, I would expect something to actually like pass, or at very least, like these two assertions should be different in some way, right? Like one thing should happen if age check is enabled. Oh wait, actually no, this is what we want, right?
Yeah,
Because they're
yeah,
both
so
yeah.
18-year-olds and 24-year-olds would both have passing age checks. They both would be true. So if you scroll down to line 63, like here's the test case for somebody who's a minor. Okay. So, okay. And that one does have a different assertion. That is expecting like the error message to be displayed. Okay. So I'm feeling like these tests are correct. And I guess we got to look at the mutant again and figure out what's going on. Oh, also, I'm gonna kind of read the stream chat. Somebody might
Yeah.
have said something.
Oh, okay. Got it. So,
Ooh.
wait. Yeah, Okay. So it's checking what we what our business logic, what our UI logic says is if we're not worried about the age at all, or and that would imply that we are worried about the age, if this age is legal drinking age, then go ahead and execute some logic. The mutant decided if we are worried about the age at all, yeah, or drinking age. But I just don't know how to fix
So
that in the tests.
Um, it might be a change from making the source code.
Oh,
So maybe instead of the syntax for or, like the pipe or bar bar, we can do the two ampersands. We can do and. But like let's speak out
that
loud.
that doesn't
Is that
sound right to me.
because what it well, let's look at the source code.
Yeah, we are. So here it is. Um, okay, well,
We
I guess
want
we could break
okay.
this out, right? So we could say, const um oh, let's see. Always gotta figure out the um okay. Here we go. We'll say const check for age equals oh wait, no, here. Const ignore age. There we go. Is and we can go very explicit here. This age check is explicitly false, or const um uh check and by alcohol, which would be if this dot age check, and we're gonna get very very explicit here again, is true, and this dot is allowed to buy alcohol. I just don't know why this is better, you know? Um, but here, we could say then ignore age, or this should be actually buy alcohol. Yeah, like this is equivalent. I don't know that I've made anything better here.
Mhm.
If ignore age or can buy alcohol. The only thing that is different here is that this condition now explicitly checks for age check, right?
So yeah. So I'm wondering now if we'll get a different result when we rerun
Sure,
Stryker.
sure.
Yeah.
Let's try it. Okay. This is gonna take us a bit.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
and so one of two things will happen. We're either about to kill that mutant or it'll still exist. if
sure.
it if it has been killed and that's what the striker tool was guiding us to do, um what that is an example of is many tools in software development are opinionated. They kind of push you towards like a certain behavior or a certain type of coding. It would be like if you ran like some static testing tools or like linter over your code, and it
Mm-hmm.
it it now says no, that's not subjective, your code must have this syntax or be this way. Um and so then your team can decide if you agree or not. Your team could go in and turn off a specific operator that y'all
Mm-hmm.
don't agree with, or you could even add operators to enforce coding standards that your team has.
Okay.
But yeah, it's something to be aware of. You can trust the tool and use it and take it at face value, but the real strength and usefulness of the tool is getting to know it a little bit and getting to know like what's under the hood and is
Yeah.
it serving you and your testing strategy. Yeah.
Gotcha. And we do have some feedback that like the new code is easier to read, and I do hear you on that. Definitely, Travis.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously we're gonna we're gonna let Stryker finish what it's
Okay.
doing, but in the meantime, so when it comes to linter tools, there's very often a way to like ignore the next line or something like that. Is there a way where I can
Hmm.
basically tell Stryker like, hey, just don't worry about this line. I know it's messy. Like I know best or whatever, and like just
Hmm.
don't create any mutants here.
I usually see Stryker configured to either ignore a specific file or a specific directory or folder.
Okay.
Um, if you're just trying to ignore a specific line, I haven't played the latest, and I mentioned like 6.2 like just came out, so this
Yeah.
might have changed. But to my knowledge, you don't have a way to just ignore a certain line.
Okay.
But what my team would do when we had that a few years ago is we would say like it's okay to have X percentage for like that certain folder. So
Sure.
we would know like okay, that one's not going to be at 100 because there's a mutant there that we've assessed and we're cool with it.
Yeah, it
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of this
Yeah.
comes down to like that team communication, right? Because
Hmm.
yeah, again, you're not going to magically have 100% perfect result here, you know. Um, so let's talk then about kind of those team processes, right? Because there's a lot of different ways that, like at the human level, you can start to incorporate this into the workflow. Like we start by like incorporating this into our CI, right? Like that just becomes part of our scripts. But as a team, like this only matters if you and I, as developers on a team together, hold ourselves to this, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
um, what
Um,
are some
and I just
ways at a team level you've seen this incorporated into a process?
Um, so that's the thing. If you're working as a team, your team will need buy-in. If your team already has trust
Mhm.
and like enjoys software testing, it will probably be easier to get buy-in.
Yeah.
If your team is really apprehensive about software testing in general, um, either they don't like it or maybe they have a strong opinion, maybe they're into like Kent C. Dodd's like testing trophy where it's like whoa, less unit tests, like chill on that, and like let's focus on end to end and like integration tests. You'll notice that this doesn't assess the quality of those of end to end or integration tests. So this is a good tool if your team does use and does believe in unit testing. So
Okay.
that's one thing to call out. Yeah.
And
Um,
it seems
yeah.
like you could do things like you could say, "Hey, we're just gonna set this up, right?" And you know, the
Yeah.
first time we run this, like we've got 49% coverage in a file, right? And then we as a team
Mhm.
commit, like, thou shalt never have a lower score, right? The score can only like stay the same or go up. Seems like a process that the team could build in, right?
Yes. Okay. And yeah. I hope that y'all will take away today that this is a very low commitment thing to just try out. Like your team can run this tool over your code base and then decide if you want to go further with it. And even if you do, you could do it on a trial basis. Tactically, it's very easy to remove this tool, turn it off, or even just like drop your threshold so that you're not chasing 100. You can drop it to be low. I wrote about this on my mutation testing poster. We linked it earlier. I'm going to drop it again. It's in the section called the developer experience mutation testing.
Okay.
Also,
Um,
while you were talking, I'm not sure because I haven't run into this too many times, but there is this thing in mutation testing. It's called an equivalent mutant, and there is a slim chance that that is what we're fighting right now. I honestly need time to read through it, but I'm going to drop the link for it. This is on the Stryker docs.
okay.
Um, if this is an equivalent mutant, then that might be why we're struggling to kill it. Yeah,
Okay. Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know, cause it's stuff like, here, we're like, what it's done here, and it's substituted our stuff for a conditional expression now, but, it's saying
Mhm.
like, "Hey, I took this dot age check equals true, and I replaced it with true." Uh, yeah, and it's like, at that point, it's like, what do you even do here, you know? You don't I don't really see a way to, like, improve the logic around that. I guess you could you I guess the assertion here is we need to do some better checks around when this age check is false. But um okay.
Yeah.
I really like a question from Anthony, which is how do you make tests spark joy for developers who just can't get enthusiastic about them?
Mhm. I think that humans and developers are driven by different things. So it helps if you understand what does spark joy. If they're mastery driven, you can say, hey, this tool will coach you. Like, this is good for your self efficacy. You're going to get stronger at writing code and testing. If they're purpose driven, you can argue, this is production confidence. This is preventing defects and maybe even outages. Like, that's what's in it for you.
Mm.
And like, maybe they're driven by something else. So you can build your business case around it. Yeah. We all have different paths towards software testing. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Jim, good friend of the stream, Jim, I'm gonna actually shout him out. He wants to know what it's like working on a Greenfield project with Stryker. So if you've got, a brand new project that your team has just started and you do Stryker from the beginning, like how is that different? What does that feel like for you? And have you actually been in that position?
I have been lucky to be in that position. So thank you for the question, Jim. Um, what that does is it allows you to have confidence along the way. And this is especially powerful if your team is combining this with other like strategies for software testing. So for example, test-driven development is a really great pair to have the mutation testing with it. Also, like, your testing should be like layered, right? It is useful to have like a holistic approach. But like, that can be very overwhelming if you're backfilling on a mature project. So what is awesome is if your project is greenfield, you get to design at the beginning. You get to design like what that testing strategy is. What do you care about? Like, how many people are going to use this thing? How many people are going to like be coding this thing? And then you can decide what that sweet spot is. So you're not under testing, but you're not over testing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But like, for example, if you have 0 unit tests and you run it, you will be in a good place to start. And then as you keep your unit tests at 100, like each file that's created, you add unit tests, you can also keep in parallel your mutation testing at the same percent.
Gotcha. Um, yeah, Jim says this is a new team he's inheriting. Previously, it's just been end to end, so he's thinking to sell this in alongside unit testing. So I think that's awesome. Yeah, it's like the earlier you do this, the earlier
Mhm.
you build in the processes for surfacing. How good
Yeah.
are the tests that we're writing, the like faster turnaround you can get. Because I've definitely a team I was on at my last role, like we were writing unit tests. We had some like end-to-end tests and stuff like that. But a lot of times we would end up with like, wedges of the code base that were old as time, and just hadn't had a whole lot of like testing around it, right? Like it's just incredibly difficult to like get the momentum to like even start those tests. But like, yeah, building that in and surfacing even like what are the possible entry points for bugs, I think is hugely, hugely powerful. Um, so
Mhm.
cool. So what we've seen today is that mutation testing introduces possible code and logic changes into your application to see how many of your tests fail and see how many of them succeed, and then surfaces opportunities to either improve your tests or add new tests. Um, yeah, that's really cool. Do you have any kind of parting thoughts on this before we sign off, Adrian?
Um, I just want to thank you for your time today. It was really great to get in front of y'all again and talk about this. I challenge y'all to give it a try. You don't have to add it to your pipeline. You can run this like locally, and you can find out in an hour, maybe 2 hours if it's a large code base. You can get a feel if this is something that's going to work
Mhm.
well with what you already have or not. Um, so it's low risk. Give it a try. And if you are a JavaScript developer, or some of the other flavors we mentioned, I highly, highly recommend Stryker. The docs are great, and I think you'll have a great developer experience. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna real quickly, we're gonna shout out a few things, but y'all, Thank you for being here. If this is your first time with Some Antics, give us a follow. That way you can keep apprised of all the streams coming up. I've just sent a link to someantics.dev, which has a schedule on the homepage so you can look and see what all the streams coming up are. I'm really, really excited about a lot of streams that we've got coming up. This Friday, Chance Strickland is joining us on the stream again. We're going to be talking about accessibility as powered by the backend with tools like, just general backend development, but also progressive enhancement. Next Tuesday, Maxi Ferreira is coming on. Maxi has been playing around with the new experimental page transitions API for getting seamless page transitions when you navigate across pages. So we're going to be playing around with that. He's built a lovely demo, and I'm so, so excited to learn. We've got Todd Libby coming on. We've got Graham the Dev coming on. Just so many wonderful people coming on. So just so much to love about the schedule coming up. And you should also follow Some Antics on Twitter. I've just put a link to that in the chat. That way you can keep apprised of all the streams coming up as well. And while you're following people on Twitter, go follow Adrianne. Let me put her Twitter in the chat again. Yeah, there we go. Stick around, chat. We are going to find someone to raid. But in the meantime, thank you
Yeah.
so much for being here. Adrianne, again, thank you so much for your time. This has been super, super cool, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Can we do one more thing before we hang up? Can
One
we
more
get
what?
one more thing
Oh,
before
sure.
we hang up? Can we get some tunas in the chat?
Oh, we gotta have some tunas in the chat. Yes.
Tuna.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're.
That's what today was missing. We always
I
need more
know.
tuna.
Now, tuna's
Yeah.
over napping in another room.
Okay.
There we go.
But
Y'all, thank you
yeah.
so much for being here. Stick around. We are gonna raid someone, but yeah, I will see y'all on Friday, I hope. Bye, y'all.